On this day, 195 years ago, a very, very important event took place because at 35 minutes past 1 in the morning, the Royal London and Holyhead mail coach crossed over the Menai Suspension Bridge. It really was such a great event because then, for the first time ever, it was possible to cross from the mainland onto Anglesey without experiencing the perils of the fast-flowing tides of the Menai Straits. There are many, many stories about the terrors of the ferry crossing and the avaricious nature of the ferryman. It's reported in the early 1800s there was a charge of 1 shilling per head and half a crown per wheel. The crossing for cattle and pigs, that was much more hazardous because they had to swim, although they could take a welcome respite on a tiny island which was called, not unsurprisingly, Ynys Moch, Pig Island. The livestock and the grain produced on this island has been vital throughout history, and it's long been known as Môn Mam Cymru, the mother of Wales. But Anglesey was also very important because it was a point of access to Ireland, and the need for good communication to that troubled land was absolutely vital. With the passage of the bill for the Act of Union with Ireland in 1800, the volume of traffic increased along the Holyhead Road. So the General Post Office petitioned Parliament for a committee to look into the state of roads in North Wales. And in those days of individual enterprise and local control, that was quite remarkable that they should be thinking of a national policy for the road system. The engineer selected to undertake this work and eventually to build the road and the bridges was Thomas Telford, and he was appointed in 1811. He was the son of a shepherd, born in a shepherd's cottage, and he served an apprenticeship as a stonemason. However, by the time of his appointment, he was already a very famous engineer. Indeed, he's been acknowledged as one of the greatest civil engineers of the industrial age, even being nicknamed the Colossus of Roads. Building the road was always going to be demanding, but his massive challenge was to span the notorious tidal race of the Menai Straits. There were a number of designs for spanning the water that were considered, but it was the need to retain sufficient space for the tall-masted sailing ships to negotiate the narrows that led Telford to solve the problem by, as he said, the principles of suspension. Two massive masonry pillars built out of stone quarried at Penmon supported the chains that in turn were to carry the road surface 100 feet above the high water mark. To haul the chains in position required both brute strength and very careful coordination. The first chain was fixed in position in April 1825. Two ropes bearing the main chain were attached to capstans and passed on large pulley blocks over one of the pillars. 150 labourers manned the capstans, and the occasion was admirably described by Samuel Smiles in his book, The Lives of the Great Engineers. And this is what he wrote. When all was ready, the signal was given to go along. A band of fifers struck up a lively tune, the capstan was instantly in motion, and the men stepped round in a steady trot. All went well. The ropes gradually coiled in. As the strain increased, the pace slackened a little, but "Heave away, now she comes," was sung out. Round went the men, and steadily and safely rose the ponderous chain. I think it would be really great if every modern contract should have a clause requesting musical accompaniment at significant points in the work program. Wouldn't that be lovely? When the first chain was fixed in position and swaying gently high above the swirling water, it's said that three of the workmen ran across from side to side, thus being the first ever to cross the straits by means of a bridge. The local newspaper reported that, and I quote, "A cobbler of the neighbourhood crawled to the centre of the curve and there finished a pair of shoes, when, having completed his task, he returned in safety." Evidently Telford was not amused and considered such pranks to be dangerously foolhardy. The shoes were reported to have been sold for a sovereign. Well, if the fixings of the chains were great occasions, so too was the opening of the bridge in January 1826, when, after daylight, crowds gathered from miles around to celebrate this very momentous event. There were many written reports of this great occasion, and one of them stated, "At one time it was so crowded that it was difficult to move along. Most of the carriages of the neighbouring gentry, stage-coaches, post-chaise, gigs and horses passed repeatedly over and kept up a continual procession for several hours." It continued by stating that the demands for tickets were so great that they could not be issued fast enough, and many, in the madness of their joy, threw their tickets away so they might have the pleasure of paying again. Not a single accident or unpleasant occurrence took place, and everyone appeared satisfied with the safety of the bridge, and delighted to say, "I crossed the first day it opened." The receipts were about £18. The building of the road and the opening of the bridge was so very, very important, because it reduced the travel time along that road, which in bad weather was recorded could be as much as 3 days, but it brought it down to a mere 26 hours. Now we can whiz across the straits, literally in a matter of seconds, but let's spare a thought for those early travellers. I was so pleased to find a comment in the book The Gossiping Guide to Wales that was published in 1896. In it, the author identified a couple of individuals, the like of whom are often overlooked by history, but they played such an important part, because that early morning in January 1826, the coach was driven by David Davis, the coachman, attended by William Reed, the guard. I wonder how often they related their experiences of that profoundly historic occasion. Of course, the Straits are now also spanned by the Britannia Bridge, another important piece of engineering built initially for the railway age and then converted much later to carry motorized vehicles as well. But the story of that bridge, well, that indeed is another story. But let's close with the Enniglyn, written in 1832 by the poet David Owen, Dwi Wyn Oaivion.
Uchelgair uwch y weilgi, cyr y byd, ei cerbydau drosti, chwythau, holl llongau y llu, ewch a dan ei chedwyni.
High fortress above the sea, the world drives its carriages across it, and you, all you ships of the sea, pass beneath its chains.